Hello students, welcome for the session. In today's session, we are going to study about the different positions of the CSS, that is static, absolute, relative and initial.
Hi and welcome to TechSet Tutorials. Today we are going to learn about one of the most important properties in CSS called position. We will take a look at a very simple and a small example to demonstrate how different values of this property position works. And for each value, I'm going to show a practical example of where to use them. So please go through the entire tutorial to understand the concept. First of all, here are some property values that are commonly used: static, absolute, relative, fixed, and initial. So let's understand the first property value of position, static. So for that, I have three elements here on the left side, first, second, and third, and I have some common styles for it. And then for each element, I have different background so we can understand how they are moving around. Now, by default, each of these elements would have position as static. Let's look at this. So if I inspect element and go to the computed property, and as you can see, it's static at the bottom here. So by default, the position is static. Static really means, when it comes to position, is do not interfere, which means let the other properties of this element take care of the position. Now let's look at the position relative. So for that, I'm going to keep the element first and the third as position static, which is by default. But the second one, I can change it to position relative. But before we start, I want you to understand one concept. Currently, based on this arrangement, for each element, the top left corner, which is around here, I would consider it as an origin of this element, which means that if I change, let's say, the size of the element, that spot, top left, does not change. So for example, if I say I change the fonts, let's say change the height to be, let's say, 50 pixels, right? Which means it's going to expand. But as you can see, the top left corner doesn't move. So in a nutshell, let's remember that the origin of each element is the top left corner. Now, if I change the second element's position to relative and run it again, nothing really changes. Now, changing the position to relative simply doesn't do anything. However, it enables four different properties to work on it: the right, left, top, and bottom. You can apply these properties to move the second element around. So for example, if I apply, let's say I'm going to remove the height here and apply top 10 pixel. When I do that, the second element actually moves 10 pixels down, which means it adds 10 pixels between its origin and itself on the top. If I say left 10 pixels, which means it's going to add 10 pixels between its origin and itself, which means when I say 10 pixel left, it's actually going to move 10 pixel right. And vice versa, if I say 10 pixel right, which means the element's going to move 10 pixel to left from its origin. And now again, its origin is right here, the original before we moved the element So that's what's happening. Basically now we can move the element around using its origin as a reference point. Now as you can see, the elements around are not really affected by this move. Let's say if I say top 15 pixel, the first element stays exactly as before. The third element also is the same place. Only the second element moved. Think of this like if there are three guys standing in a line and they are touching each other, okay? Which means if the second guy has to move, the third guy would move as well. But let's say if you want to keep the first guy and this third guy in its own original position, and if you want the second guy to move a few steps backwards, then he has to go on the top of the second guy. This is what's happening here. The second element is actually going on the top of the third guy. The third guy is still there. So this is a position relative. This is really useful when you have an element which you need to move without really disturbing its environment. Here in this example, I have two lines. The first line is basically hello world people, and the second line is I am next line. And let's say if I want to move this world tiny bit bottom below, right, without disturbing. Usually when you do something like this, the line below will also move. If you add, let's say, add a padding or add some margin on the top, it would move. But here, if I want to do this, all I have to do is make the position of the element world here, which is class B, to relative, and the rest other element would be position static. And I'm just gonna say top 10 pixel. Okay, if I run this, as you can see, world moved just a little below because it added 10 pixel on the top, and the bottom line is actually not affected by it. So this is a real use case of where do you want to use a position relative. Now, the next property value for position we're going to look at is absolute. This is probably the most used one to do all kind of funky stuff. Let's look at it. So if I change the second element to position absolute and run it. Now let's look at this. First, it's still there. The second and third seems to be on top of each other. Basically, second is on top of third. And remember, when we had a position relative, we had first, and then there was a space, and then the third, and then we were able to move the second, but the reserved space was still there. So the second had its own reserved space. Here it seems like the first and third is actually bumping into each other, and as if the second doesn't even exist, and the second is actually floating on a different space. Actually, if I change the size of third here, let's say height, if I can hide, let's say 50 pixel, you would see actually the third is actually underneath of second. So here, making second element absolute makes it disturbs the entire environment. Imagine if you have third, fourth, and fifth, everybody would move one element up, and it would take the third would take second's place, fourth would take third's place, and everything would move up. So it does disrupt the environment. In position relative, we can move the second element compared to its own origin. Here it's a little bit different. We can still move the second element around using top, left, bottom, and right, but in reference to its parent, in reference to its relative parent. If I say top 20 pixel, it would move. As you can see, the parent is actually the parent of all these elements because all three elements is covered in one parent. So its parent is actually top left corner. In order to demonstrate, I'm going to add a parent here. So I'm going to add div element with class parent and then just wrap it around it. I am also going to add another class on the top called uncle. This way we know that it's really reference to the parent and not reference to the uncle. And for here also I can have a common style. And now if I say, for the second one, if I say top 0 pixel, it goes all the way because it parent it's not relative, means it's actually going to, it's finding a relative parent. If it cannot find it, it will just be relative to its, it would reference to its root. So instead we're gonna add a parent class and make it position relative. Now if I run this, now as you can see, now the parent, basically the parent is enclosing element 1, 2, and 3. So its origin is actually a top of element 1, which is right under uncle. So it is referencing to its second element is referencing to the parent. So if I say top, let's say 5 pixel, it's going to move reference to that first element or the parent. But as you can see, it's not referencing to the uncle. So this is how the absolute behaves. First of all, it disrupts its environment. So basically anything any element that is defined after this element would basically take its place, and the absolute element would go in a different space basically, but it would be, by default it would be referenced to its parent element, its relative parent element. Now let's look at this example. In this example I have some element. Within that I have some text and some are more text, and there is a button here. Now what I want to do is I want this button to be here somewhere. If I say top 20 pixel and let's say left 150 pixel, and when I run this, it would put itself here. Now I can conveniently move this around within this space by manipulating top, left, right, and bottom. Okay, now let's look at the position value position fixed. So for that, I'm just going to change the middle element's position to fixed. When I run it, it pretty much behaves like absolute. But here, the difference is, instead of moving a reference to its parent, now it's moving to the root, means the body element. You can use the top, left, right, bottom to move it reference to its root, which means if the page moves, it's gonna stay exactly there, right? So for example, if I add lots of third element, and let me tidy it up. So I have so many of these third elements, it's gonna add some scrolling here. But as you can see, the second element doesn't move. It stays there because it's referenced to its root, which is the body element. Now if I change this to absolute and run it again, now it would move with the scroll, and now it's reference to its parent. And if I change this to relative, then it would find its place in the stack. So here's an example. Let's say if you have a web page and you want to have an advertisement that just stays there, you can use position fix. As you can see, if I move here, the advertisement on the right stays exactly the same position. You can have also some sort of a menu where you have to do some selection, where you want to make it a fixed position so that even if the page moves, it's still accessible at the same location. It doesn't move with the page. So that's all, folks.
Welcome back, students. I hope you all have enjoyed the session. We'll continue in the next session. Thank you.